Alright darlings, how the devil are we? Elden Ring has dropped, and as you can imagine everyone is very excited. Basically they put out a video, it's half an hour long and there's about 15 minutes of gameplay trailer stuff to go through. So in true channel fashion we've gone through and dug out all the interesting facts for you, and hopefully it'll give you a little bit more to look forward to. So what we do know so far is a big open world. We now can confirm that it is an absolutely massive world featuring in the whole realm of Dark Souls style combat. The world looks absolutely stunning, and in the background you can see a huge golden Nordrassil style tree. I don't know if it is inspired by kind of Viking mythology, but certainly does kind of resemble that. So the mount in the game is more a spell than it is an actual companion that follows you around all the time. You kind of whistle and it summons, and when you get off it disappears into a blue smoke puff. Very similarly to the other games, there's going to be lots of spots where you can rest up. Instead of them being bonfires this time, they're called sites of grace. And these are represented by what looks like to be golden arrows sticking out of the ground. Now with the game A being so big and B the game being so popular, it looks like they're trying to appeal to all consumer bases, because they've also included something called rays of guiding light. Now these are light rays that kind of give you a hint on what direction that you should be going. Of course they did emphasize that you don't have to follow them, it's merely a suggestion. Now in terms of character development, they look like they're having loads of fun with it this time. There's a big pot man who literally is a pot with arms. His name is Alexandra the Iron Fist. And in the small mission you basically knock him out with a two-handed club, and then I presume he goes on to give you more missions. They also introduced what I think is one of the main characters as well in terms of story-wise. Her name was Melanir. She's got one eye with a tattoo over there, comes across very cloaky and dark and foreboding, and basically says that you will be going on some sort of journey. And the last character that they introduced is Roger the Sorcerer, who you find out later on in one of the dungeons, which we will go on to talk about. The voice acting was absolutely wonderful. It was really clear, and they've all got this kind of sweet British charm to them. And I will say also about the bosses, which we'll get onto in a little bit, they also had some great voice acting to them, and they really set up the atmosphere nicely for the engagement you're about to go into. So how the world works. When I initially saw the open worldness of it, I thought, it does seem a little bit empty and sparse, and this space just seems to be there for the sake of having space. This was later on put to rest because of the way that they've described and divided up the world. So you have the main world element, which has like random camps all over it. There's treasure all over the place that you can loot and get, but there are also catacombs, there's dungeons, and there's also caves. With all these extra pieces, there's story narrative that's got to be gained. There's like secret goodies and weapons and bosses hidden away. In the trailer they showcased two of them. They showcased a catacomb which basically had some treasure, but you didn't actually see what was down there. And they also showed you the first dungeon that you'll get access to, which is called Stormvale Castle. The castle, what we do know so far is A, that it's ruled by Godric the Golden, who is the first boss that you go up against, and is also brimming with tarnished hunters. Now all I know so far about the tarnished is that you are tarnished, and apparently you get hunted and chopped up into bits and used for something else. What was really good to take away about the dungeons and catacombs is that they are really well mapped out. There's lots of multiple ways that you can tackle them, and also there's a constant flow of enemies. There was far more enemies in the dungeons than there were in the open world from what I could see in the trailer. And if you've ever played Biomutant, then you'll know exactly what I mean, that having just open world for the sake of having open world can actually be a very bad thing for a game. Now the last thing I want to talk about, general worldy bits, is that there are these things called spirit springs that you can jump around and you can access different platforms. They said they wanted to take away the tedium of having to traverse the kind of like the multi-levels of height in the game, and this is their approach to going about it. And the other thing is that there are map fragments that you will have to collect to see the whole map and get an idea of what's in the world. Okay, so let's talk about all the good juicy things about action RPGs, and that's loot, spells and abilities. So we now have confirmation that there is a crafting system in the game. The crafting example that they used was to create something called sleep bone arrows. You fired your bow at the opponent, they fell asleep, and then you can perform an assassin move to kill off them fairly quickly. In terms of general roles, we'll call them, there were three types that they mainly demonstrated. There was your kind of standard well-armored melee class. There was your leather type cloth wearing agility style rogue-ish looking characters, and there was also your battle robe donning mage style characters as well. Now, if you're wondering what type of weapons that you can get inside of the game, these are all the weapons that I have seen so far. So we had two-handed scimitars. There was also two-handed swords. Now, in terms of interesting things about your swords, there was a lot of abilities that actually used your blood to either give you additional damage or perform an attack on the enemy. So lots of new different types of movesets, and looks to be a very interesting style of gameplay. There's also, as previously mentioned, a bow and arrow for those who liked ranged classes. There's also two-handed spears. There's also a spear in each hand, so you can dual wield spears. There's the ever-loving shield. So there was the big sturdy kind of crusader shield, and there was also the little buckler shield. You saw a spear and shield in your hand. And for those who like mage style abilities, there was also staffs, and you had a staff and spear dual wielding combo, and there was also staff and shield combo. For those who really kept an idea on all the different weapons, you may also notice that when they're announcing the multiplayer, that the person came in to help you also had a set of dual wielding talons which haven't been seen before. And my personal favourite out of all the weapons in there was a two-handed axe that as you bring it down, it summons a giant pair of skeletons and kills off the enemy. Now, I know there's a huge amount of people out there who really enjoy playing magic in these kind of games, so these are all the spells that I have also spotted. So we've got a general magic projectile that you can fire out of your staff. There was also fireballs that were spotted in there. There was also a really cool magic arrow ability which was used with the bow during the dragon fight, and this fires 3 magic missile style arrows out of your bow basically. My personal favourite though was for the staff ability, which looks like a giant iron cannon that you can basically fire at the enemy. And it looks like they're really going for some big, powerful, very flashy magic abilities. There was also an ability that summoned like rain clouds above your opponent, and then it fired down like ionic storm magic rain at the enemy to damage them. And another personal favourite of mine, and I'm not sure if it's just my love of anime, but it was basically you two-handed sword ability. You charge it up and the sword just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you bring it down on your enemy for huge damage. Now, we talked about an axe that could summon spirits to help you in the game. There are also various items that summon other spirits, and apparently there are different types of spirits, and it's just going to be up to you what you want to assist you during the game. But there were 2 examples in which they used it. One was a little bell which summoned a small horde of spirits to assist you, and the other one being the axe that we showcased before. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more weapons and magic than this, but I just wanted to talk about them because the ones they showcased looked absolutely awesome. So the last thing that I want to talk about is there were potentially 3, if not 2 bosses in the game. The first one I'm still not sure on. But basically, the first boss that you come across, or at least a large creature, is a giant dragon. And the interesting thing about that is it highlighted the first use of mounted combat in the game. Now, it still is unclear whether or not this is just something that you'd use outside in the open world, or it is part of the core combat, and whether or not you can actually have different mounted combat skills, or it is just a case that you're on the horse using your normal abilities. But either way, the big dragon looked extremely cool, and in true kind of Dark Side-esque inspired fashion, it had great scale and you had to dodge around, and when it hit you, you really felt like you were getting crushed. Next boss didn't have a name, but it was in the autumn areas. He's basically a giant dude covered in bone armor on his bone horse / camel, and he has a huge axe and he's swinging it around, and there's fire coming out of the ground, and you have to do lots of dodging and rolling action. And that was the fight that really highlighted a lot of the main magic abilities we saw. And the last boss, which is my personal favourite, is Godric the Golden, and he kind of slowly pulls off his cape, and he's got like 800 different hands, and he's got a huge axe, and he's got 2 hands on his back hands. And yeah, you have to go in a big old fight, and I'm guessing that he is one of the first bosses that you fight. And we got to showcase a couple of things. We got to see phase 1, where he's whirling around and doing like hurricanes with his axes, and you've got to dodge. And the second phase, which looks to be my favourite, where if you look at the start of the scene, he's like kissing and praising this dragon. Well, basically, he looks like he absorbs it into one of his arms, and then he comes alive and he's like biting and snapping and breathing at fire. And you get to see the great execution scene where he kind of eats you and then barbecues you in the head with the flame breath. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed these details. Are you still excited about the game? How much did you love the gameplay? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a great discussion. But for now, have a great day, everyone, and I'll be back with more news and reviews soon.